All right. So good evening, everyone. Once again, welcome to this session. And I'm Rashmi from greytHR and today's moderator of this session. So first of all, I would like to welcome once again all of you to our 40th Ask the Expert webinar, Parichay. And also wishing you all a very happy new year. And may this year be filled with success, love, and happiness. And this is the greetings from greytHR to all of you. And also moving on to our today's topic, HR compliance in 2023, the challenges and opportunities. So today's discussion is going to be all about this topic. And also before I dive into the topic, let's do a little housekeeping on how the session goes. Well, the instructions of the session remain as usual. That is, the session is divided into two parts, wherein the first part we will be having a discussion with our expert in the session today, which is then followed by audience Q&A. So I can say Q&A is where time is all yours, participants. You can put across all your questions with regard to the discussions we are going to have soon in some time. And we will be more than happy to take it up here, all your questions, and also we'll try and get the answer from our expert today. All right. And also worried about missing out on any part of the session, because right now the session is being recorded and the same will be shared with all of you once the session is done. All right. So I think on this note, we can now begin our today's session. Well, to talk more about our today's topic, one important role of a human resource leader within a business is to ensure safe, healthy, fair, and equitable workplace for employees, right? That means overseeing an organization's adherence to laws and regulations governing labor practices to ensure what's called HR compliance. But what are all the HR compliance issues? What should employers and employees keep in mind, and what is its importance? So in the next 1 hour, we are going to discuss this in length with our today's expert, Mr. Amit Sharma, Vice President and Head of People and Culture, Volvo Group India, and understand HR compliances in detail. But before that, let me tell you a little more about Mr. Amit Sharma. So, Mr. Amit Sharma, in a career spanning over 2 decades, he has earlier worked across various HR roles, of which past more than a decade has been in leadership positions with top of the line organizations in a diverse set of industries such as Indian Oil, Johnson and Johnson, Philips, T Connectivity, and now with Volvo Group. With a high focus on business HR, his experience spans on workforce strategies, HR business partnering, organization development, change management, capability building, leadership development, employee relations, employee engagement, inclusion and diversity at workplace, thus fueling business growth through high performance culture. He has successfully set up various greenfield organizations and has also led business footprint consolidation. Also, he is a proponent of bringing technology to HR processes while retaining the human connections in the organization. And not just that, Amit has received various internal and external recognitions for his work in HR and has been speaking on HR topics in various external forums. And he has been Vice President of National HRD Network, Bangalore chapter for the year 2019 to 2021, and is currently a member of CII's National Committee on Industrial Relations. Sir, we are honored to have you here in the session. Once again, welcome to this session. So sorry to interrupt you, sir. I think you're on mute.
Okay, yeah, that's it. Thank you so much, and it's my pleasure to be on this call and on this webinar. Looking forward to the conversations.
Sure. All right. So with this note, let's head towards the first part of our today's discussion. So now we will have a brief discussion on our today's topic with Mr. Amit Sharma. Mr. Amit, I think let's start with basics if I have to tell you. So my very first question that I would like to know from you is, what are the different types of compliance in HR?
Okay, so when you look at compliance, it sometimes feels like a bit of a scary subject, and a scary topic, with somebody kind of looking on through your shoulder and say, hey, what are you doing? Is it really in line with the laws or not? It's not that scary. It's simple if you do your things well. But if you look at different kinds of compliances, I would actually put them under 8 different buckets. Now, if I look at the overall landscape of compliances, the first one I will call the statutory compliances. Statutory compliances are the ones which are from a legal standpoint. You have various laws which are there now, which the government passes, whether it's a state government or the central government, and they pass those laws which we need to follow. Labor laws is one of them, whether it's the new wage codes which are coming in, or the Factories Act, or the Contract Labor Act, or the Industrial Disputes Act. All of that will form part of what we call as the statutory compliance piece. And one of the subsets for us would be labor laws in that, apart from the Companies Act compliances or other accounting compliances. The other piece is the regulatory compliance. When I say regulatory compliance, it's about compliances which are being driven through certain regulatory agencies. Certain organizations are regulated by a regulator. For example, you have a regulator in insurance, you have a regulator in terms of financial services, you have a regulator in terms of civil aviation. So these are some of the examples. So when they also have a list of requirements which come in, which HR has to really comply with. So RBI will give a set of requirements for people when it comes to NBFCs and banks. IRDA will give it about insurance companies. DGCA will give it about airlines. So that's the other set of compliances which we need to follow, which are apart from the statutory and the labor law compliances which organizations need to do. The next type of compliance is what I'll call it as the contractual compliance, which essentially means that when we get into a contract with our employees, or for that matter within another agency, are we living up to what we have said? So for example, when we join organizations, we sign an appointment letter which has almost about generally 8-9 pages, 30-35 clauses. You will have that, and then the entire relationship between an employee and the employer is primarily governed by that employment contract. So it's about that, those kind of contracts. Sometimes a full-time contract, sometimes it's a part-time contract, sometimes a partial working contract of contract which is like 30 hours per week, 20 hours per week. We create that. Certain there are internship contracts are there. So all of those which are which are not governed by a law from that standpoint, but it's more governed by the Contract Act, and it falls under the contractual compliances from an HR standpoint. Then there will be something that's called as I would call it HR technology compliance. Now, technology compliance primarily is about when we are putting in certain technology frameworks in the organizations, how much they are complying with the local laws as well as global laws. For example, in MNCs, one of the key things is data privacy. Now, in India today, we may not have currently a clear law around it, and that's still a work in progress, and the government is going to come up with that. But internationally, there are very, very strong laws about data privacy, who can see the data, who cannot, what kind of data can be used for what purposes. So when you have a technology being configured, how much of that technology is complying with these kind of ecosystems and these kind of regulations which are there? That's the next set of compliance, I would call it. Then I would come to something which is called as internal compliances. Internal compliances are more around compliances which are around internal processes and ways of working. See, every organization will set its own ways, the processes. There will be a workflow which is there, certain approvals, certain things around delegation of authority, who can approve what, for what you need, what kind of policies are there. So all of that, complying with that is also an equally important part. And you just can't be arbitrary when it comes to dealing with employees, because that's very critical. The moment you are arbitrary around dealing with employees, you lose your employees, because employees will then see that we are not being fair as an organization. So that's the other piece of which we really need to ensure that whatever processes we are setting it up, they are we are complying with those processes internally in the organization. And the last two, I would call it the international law compliance, and also the country specific compliances for organizations
which are working in multiple geographies. It's equally important. For example, we complying with the ILO regulations. ILO gives a lot of advisory, the International Labour Organization, around what should be done in terms of the working hours, what should be done in terms of the rest breaks, what should be done in terms of the the rights of the workers, the rights of the employees, so all of that. And each country has its own set of rules and regulations and compliances. So those are the certain set of, if you look at in some total, there are the 8 kinds of compliances which are there, and not just one element which generally relate to, which is the law of the land. But it's not just, it's a much bigger topic which has multiple aspects to it, which we need to focus on when we look at the entire gamut of compliances in HR.
Sure, sir. So thank you for breaking down all the different types of compliances. Can you please help us understand and elaborate more on statutory compliance in HR?
So as I said, all of them will also form under HR. So all of that, what I just talked about, it will touch HR in various ways around it, whether it's, you said, the country specific, it's the internal compliances, the regulatory compliances and all. But some of the key ones which I would really come in, which is more coming from the statutory aspect of it in the Indian labor laws, there I would say broadly divided into 4 areas.
First area would be the social security, where we have compliances around Employees Provident Fund Act, we have compliances around the ESI Act, the Gratuity Act, then you have superannuation, employee compensation. All of that forms a gamut of laws which we need to comply with when it comes to the social security of the employees and social security of our workforce.
The second big bucket will be the
laws or the compliances around industrial relations. So, which is about the Industrial Disputes Act in India, or the Industrial Employment Standing Orders Act, or we look at the Trade Unions Act. In Bombay, you have the Bombay Industrial Relations Act. So all of those, because they really define how are we governing the industrial relations in an organization, and those compliances, whether we have to go ahead with the appointment, go ahead with the, any kind of disciplinary procedure to be taken, how do we deal with the unions, what are the rights of the unions versus rights of the employers, what is a fair labor practice, what's an unfair labor practice, how would we go about resolving a dispute, what are the authorities about disputes. So all of that gets governed when we look at the industrial relations laws, which I just talked about. The third big element in this will be laws around the wages, which is about the Minimum Wages Act, which is about the Payment of Wages Act, which will be about Equal Remuneration Act, will be about Payment of Bonus Act. So these are the acts which are really ensuring, from a compliance standpoint, are we really paying people fairly? So Minimum Wages Act defines that you can't really go below that. And government publishes a schedule, especially the state government as well as central governments, depending on what is the appropriate government for that particular body. You have a complete list of occupations which has industries, and then depending on the skilled, unskilled, semi-skilled, or highly skilled, and you have to comply with that. You can't go any below that. Similarly, equal remuneration, whether we are paying it for men and women for the same work, it has to be similar. You can't discriminate between men and women in terms of compensation being paid for the same kind of work which is there. Payment of wages governs payment on time, what kind of reductions you can have, what kind of reductions you cannot have, what will be the mode of payment, around the wages. And the bonus primarily again becomes, as partnering with, or I would say some kind of a contribution of the employee towards the organization growth. When the organization is growing, they also have some right to the profits which the organization is building, and then the payment of bonus act kind of covers that. So these are the kind of wages which are kind of acts which are covering the wages part of the compliances. The last piece would be more about the health, safety, environment there. And there you have laws around, whether it's Maternity Benefit Act, which talks about what kind of benefits a woman will have while they're on maternity, the safety of her job, the tenure of the leaves which are there, the Factories Act, which defines very strongly what kind of welfare measures you need to have in the company, what kind of safety measures you need to have in the company, what kind of health measures we need to keep in the organization. Similarly, things around Shops and Establishment Act. And one major addition which has happened in the last few years is the Prevention of Sexual Harassment for Women at Workplace Act. That's another big piece which HR is supposed to take care of, so that women feel safe in the workplace and they don't feel any kind of harassment on account of any kind of undesirable behavior. So broadly, these would be the kind of these four buckets are the key aspects when we look at the larger gamut of statutory compliances on that. And as I said earlier, apart from that, the HR will also have to comply with certain regulatory directives. If I said RBI directives on people when it comes to NBFCs and banks, DGCA directive when it comes to airlines, IRDA directives when it comes to insurance organizations, so on and so forth. So that's equally becomes part of it over and above what the laws expect the organizations to follow.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for elaborating. And also, in general, what happens is we understand that statutory compliance be the employee or even the organization, right? So can you please help us compliance important in the organization?
No, it's very, very critical. That's the bedrock
Of how an organization is operating. Because, see, the first and foremost thing is that following the laws of the land, following the compliance is the responsibility of everybody, whether it's an employee or it's as a citizen, or organization or body corporate. That's the fundamental, because that's the larger boundary in which we operate. We can't do things arbitrarily. We can't do things which are beyond what is legally permissible. So I would say that it goes without saying that importance of it is very, very high. But what it really means when we say why the compliance is important. Compliance is important because the number one, it tells you that the organization is doing its work or doing its business in an ethical and legal manner. We are not really doing things which are in unethical manner. We are not cutting corners. We are not doing things which are leading to a situation where people are not getting their dues or what is required to be given to them under the law. So that's very critical. It builds an image of an organization of being, an ethical organization, and everybody would like to work in an organization which is ethical. And that again helps in terms of the better employer branding, because the moment you say we are an organization where the compliance is a no compromise, we are an organization where following the laws of the land is no compromise. We always do our work in an extremely ethical manner, nothing underhand dealing, no other undesirable inducements to anybody. It makes a big difference in terms of the workplace culture. So the workplace culture itself improves when you are working in an organization which is focusing on the statutory compliances. It really helps efficiency. It really ensures that you are a better corporate citizen. The larger standing of the organization improves both in terms of financial sense as well as in terms of employee sense. And the last but not the least, it also ensures that you are not facing any kind of criminal charges or penalties or any kind of legal action against the organization when you are doing your work in a completely compliant manner. So it has both the objectives. It helps to de-risk yourself from from non-compliance related penal actions. At the same time, it's not just about that. It's also about the fact that it builds a better employer brand. It builds a better organizational brand. It creates a sense of trust in the organization. It creates a sense of respect in the organization. People feel pride in working for a company, which where the compliances and ethics are of the highest order.
Absolutely, sir. Sir, also, I think at the higher level, what I understand is, I think this statutory compliance covers everything, like right from hiring and ending the employment. It could be your salary and leave entitlements, bonuses, and many more, something like that, right? So can you please throw some light on what are the various compliances required for Indian payroll?
So as I said, compliance from that standpoint, it's a continuous journey. And when you look at the payroll perspective, some of these compliances are much more critical, which I talked about, especially the compliances around wages are the ones, and the compliances around social security. So the two set of compliances which are there when it comes to the payroll piece of it. So if I look at it, number one, it would be more about ensuring that we are paying the minimum wages. That's the first and foremost compliance, which is that the payroll cannot be processing salary which is below the minimum wages, or not being paying people to its due. The second is around the payment of wages, which is essentially means there's no undesirable deductions which are happening, and the payment is happening on time. For example, today the law says that for a for certain set of companies it's by 7th of every month, and for certain set it's maximum 10th of every month. You can't go beyond that. So ensuring that that happens is very critical piece, which the payroll needs to take care of from that. Then the other compliance which the payroll function has to follow is the income tax compliances. Now they are technically a finance compliance, but HR or the payroll function is the one who's really focuses on ensuring that the right TDS is deducted, and that amount is deposited on the behalf of the employee to the income tax department. So that's something. And if you don't do that, if you don't deduct the tax at source and deposit it on time, it has a penalty when it comes to the organization. So it's very clear that that responsibility falls on us from an HR standpoint or the payroll function standpoint, where typically the payroll is part of HR in most of the organizations, and some of them is part of finance, but generally I've seen it is part of the payroll. So that compliance is there. Then also it's a compliance around various within the income tax around various deductions which are there. Now payroll function needs to provide for that, and then currently income tax has two different regimes. The old regime and the new regime. Old regime has some exemptions which are there. New regime doesn't have that. So the employee has to choose, and the basis what the employee has chosen, you have to give employees the time to give their proof of investments where they can save income tax, as per the act, and accordingly make suitable adjustments in the tax payment for the employee, and ensure that the balance tax due is well deducted on time and paid to the government. So that's another big compliance requirement which we have from a payroll standpoint. Third piece is, I would call it, which is around the social security of ESI and PF. So employees who are covered under the ESI, which is I think it's 21,000 rupees today is the current limit, but these limits keep on changing. So anybody below that, and if you are in the notified zone where the ESI is applicable, you need to ensure that there's a relevant contribution deducted from the employee salary, and the relevant contribution is made by the organization, and that is being deposited in time with the ESI authorities, so that the employee's medical coverage under the ESI continues, and there is no non-compliance around that. Provident fund, again, 12% of the basic wages we generally say are paid as the provident fund. Though the act exempts people beyond a threshold limit, but generally all good organizations pay PF on the full basic and not only on the threshold amount, and that compliance again falls on us from a payroll standpoint. Then there are compliances around professional taxes, which is a state-based tax. Every state doesn't have professional tax requirement. Some states have that, and we need to ensure that we are deducting it on time and submitting it to the government. Gratuity is another piece which the payroll takes care of it when the employee is leaving the organization. The earlier ones which were said was all about when the employee joins and the employee's life cycle is there. Gratuity, which is as per the law, it's 5 years of eligibility. If you have 5 years of continuous service, you are eligible for gratuity, which is 15 days pay for each completed year of service. So payroll has to process for it as the employee leaves, if the employee is eligible for that. Then there is something called as employee deposit linked insurance. So that's something which is part of the overall EPFO organization, and an employer is responsible for a contribution of 0.5% of the basic salary, maximum of 75 rupees per month per employee. And that is something which is paid to the government, part of the overall provident fund. In some cases, payroll function takes or organization take a separate policy for a DLI and not and take an exemption from the PF authorities. And in some cases, it continues with the PF authorities, and that money is deposited with the PF EPFO. So that's the other piece. Then the payroll has to take care of the bonus calculation and the payment of bonus on time. So again, under the Act, if your gross salary is under 21,000 rupees, then you are eligible for payment of bonus under the Bonus Act, depending upon what kind of profitability the company has made. And this ranges from 8.33% to 20%. And payroll department is supposed to ensure that the eligibility people who are eligible are for them the bonus is calculated in line with the law and also paid in line with the law, because generally I think it's 9 months time period within which we need to ensure that the payment is made, or 8 months, I would say, not 9 months, is made, and then we need to ensure that that piece is complied with. And the last piece I'll call it, which payroll has to also take care of it, is also the Employee Compensation Act. So it is about if there is unfortunate incident or where there's any kind of an accident which arises out of or during the course of employment and which leads to any kind of a permanent disability or a partial disability beyond specified days, then in that case we need to pay the compensation as per the Employee Compensation Act, and there is a calculation around it which payroll department needs to do, and then ensure that the payment is made to the employee. So these are all the calculation, all the compliances which the payroll will need to make. Apart from that, there are compliances around Factories Act, around leaves, because again, depending upon the actual working days, there is a leave accrual which happens under the Factories Act. So that payroll department has to calculate the attendance and accordingly see how much leave has to be credited. And then there are compliances around how many times a person can take leave. There's a limit which is mentioned in the Factories Act. Some organizations stick to that limit. Some organizations are more liberal than that. So on that, there are compliances around to what extent you can accumulate the leaves under the Factories Act. So those compliances are also coming under the payroll function to ensure that employees are taken care of and things are taken care of in terms of the compliances.
Sure, sir. Thank you for enlightening us on this. I think basically statutory compliance is nothing but it's like a legal framework that an organization should adhere to, right? So whether it's your HR part of it or payroll processing, especially when we talk about payroll processing, I think there are a lot of things involved in it. Like you rightly just mentioned, it's not just about the employee's salary or take home or something. It involves your income tax calculation. It's about your provident fund, ESI. There are so many more things. So I suggest, I think it's always good to the organizations to follow these compliances strictly, so that it prevents a lot of trouble in the future, I can say. So thank you for sharing these details with us, sir. So my next thing that I would like to know from you is, according to you, what are the HR compliances that are required to be met by the organization in the first quarter of this year, that is 2023?
That's a simple one. So generally you get those trackers available in most of the places. Generally it's in the first quarter, a lot of annual returns go for various acts. So for example, you have to furnish the annual return under the Contract Labor and Regulation and Abolition Act. You have to file your annual return under the Factories Act. You have to file your annual return under the ESI Act, and the EPF Act, Factories Act. So all of that, then annual return under the Maternity Benefit Act, under the Minimum Wages Act, under the Payment of Wages Act. So primarily around all of there are a lot of annual returns which typically go during the first quarter of every year on these various laws which are there, which is more like a statement which we're giving it to the labor department or the factories department about the fact that yes, as an organization we are complying with all the requirements which are there under the law, and it may seem like a very procedural part, but it's very important because any false declaration can lead to prosecution against the board of directors of the company. So people need to be very, very clear that they are absolutely truthful in their declaration and don't unnecessarily make wrong submissions to the department, because if in audit it's found out that what the organization has said is not true, or they are not following that, it can lead to really serious implications for the board of directors or people who are the key managerial people in the organization. So, but broadly, it's a lot of annual returns under the various acts which is there going to happen. Over a period of time, it may come down because government is now looking at consolidating the various labor laws. All of that will get consolidated in future under the four wage codes, four labor codes: the code on industrial relation, code on wages, code on social security, and code on occupational health and safety. So hopefully we will be having lesser returns to be filed once these codes are all fully implemented. But as of now, under all these acts, we need to file those annual returns.
Yeah, absolutely, sir. Because it's, yeah, of course, it's the first quarter of the year, but it's also the last quarter of the financial year. So I think the choices we make here and the actions we take in the first quarter have a way of setting the tone for the entire year, is what I believe. So yeah, thanks for sharing those thoughts with us, sir. Next thing I would like to hear from you is, what are some of the best practices to enforce HR compliance in the organizations?
The biggest practice I would call is just an organization needs to be ethical and fair. I think that's number one, because HR can't be compliant if the organization itself is not a compliant organization, or if the culture of the organization is not around compliance. So that's the number one piece I would say, that what is the larger philosophy of the organization in terms of, or the culture of the organization, how the organization looks at compliances. Do they look at compliances in terms of the pain, or they look at compliances in terms of, important aspect to be to be fair and ethical to all the different stakeholders which we have. So number one is that. But if I have to enumerate certain practices, then I'd say we need to have enough. Our policies and procedures should be the one which are in line with the laws. So sometimes you can't create policies which are not in line with the laws. That's the number one, I would say. For example, if the law says that you need to pay gratuity for 5 years of continuous service, I can't make a policy which says that you will pay it after 6 years or 7 years. Or if the law says that for every 20 days of presence in office, you will get 1 day of leave, I can't make it 24 or 25. I can make it better, but I can't make it lower than what is there. So we need to ensure that there are enough procedures and those procedures are frequently audited, by someone from an overall HR audit standpoint, that are they in line with the laws or not. Sometimes what happens is we create policies which are aligned to a particular law, but the law changes after that, and our policies remain the same. For example, at some time back, the gratuity limit used to be 5 lakh rupees. Today it's 20 lakh rupees. So then, we need to immediately ensure that we are constantly altering our policies so that they are in line with what the law says. Second is, we need to have what we call as a organizational health check, and we should do it in a quarterly, duration. In terms of various compliance checklists, that's important element which we need to follow, and that helps. Then we need to also have all the records, in a soft copy readily available. Sometimes what happens is those returns, those records, they're all filed somewhere, and when you need them, you really don't find them, and then you have to really dig through some dusty files to get that. And sometimes, and especially in organizations which is now moving more paperless, just like the laptop of somebody, when the person leaves, the data also goes. So it's very important that we keep that. We need to have a central tool where all the compliances are taken care of, and all of these records are pretty much kept for anybody to see and retrieve. Then only you can do that. So otherwise, it will not happen. Then there has to be technology around it. We need to create a tool where you are putting in all the compliances, and then updating it. And there, so everybody who's responsible for the compliances need to be the ones who owns that updation in that tool. And we have those tools now available in the market, which will give you a red, yellow, green color. So if you say that, are we complying with, let's say, the 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 leaves required for maternity. Yes or no, and if yes, we have to kind of put those details there that we have followed that. And if you say no, it will immediately show you a red color. And visibility of that tool is to the senior leadership and the board of directors. So if you are reviewing the dashboards at the country leadership team level or at the board of directors level, then there is a much larger onus on everybody, because no organization would like to see their compliance checklist in red spots. They would like to see it green. They would like to see it healthy. And if you create a tool, if you invest in a tool where everybody is updating the status, and that status is rolling up to the CEO or the MD or the board of directors, the country leadership team, that helps in ensuring that the compliances are followed. Then I would say there has to be enough training to people. Sometimes people don't even know what they don't know, that something had to be done. How do you ensure that everybody who is dealing with those compliance areas, who are working in those areas where the compliances are supposed to be also taken care of, they're aware of that and they don't do anything or don't act in any manner which is non-compliant? So the training is very critical around it. Then a very clear guideline around governance that everybody has to follow. And one of the key aspects of governance is also job rotation, which sometimes what happens is if there is only one person whose job is to give the data, sometimes even the person is, let's say, fudging the data or giving wrong information, people may not know. But if you rotate people, somebody else will come in, and when they'll cross check, you will immediately come to know that whether anything wrong has happened in the system or not, or somebody fudged the data or not. So it's important that in such roles which are critical, we don't have somebody for long, and we have people who are coming in there. And I also see that and this is the practice I've seen happening in banks, where they ensure that people go on mandatory leave for some time, and during that mandatory leave period, somebody else manages their portfolio, and during that thing, they can jolly well find out that if something wrong has been done in that by the previous incumbent or not. It helps you create a nice check and balance, because somebody else will be working on that role for some time, and person, if you have done anything wrong, that can quickly get dug up. So that's important. Make effective communication. It's very important that we keep on telling employees who need to be compliant. Sometimes, in this case, you need to be continuously communicative. There is nothing called over communication in the thing of compliance. Ensure that we are complying and we are telling people about it, and we are continuously, I would call it, drilling it down their mindset that this is important, this is important, this is important. We can't cut corners here. As a company, we will not believe. And the last piece is, I would say, is you need to have zero tolerance for non-compliance. If somebody has deliberately, now, if it's happened by oversight, fair enough, person needs to be warned, and so that next time the person doesn't repeat that. But if somebody has done it deliberately, then there has to be strong consequences. That's the only way it works. Because if you know that somebody has deliberately non-complied, and then there are no consequences to that person, the message to the organization goes is that everything works. This is not that critical an area. So those are some of the things in my experience I have seen, which works if you really want to ensure that there is high level of compliance in the organizations.
Sure, sir. Also, sir, I think just some time back, we were discussing about the risks and how do we de-risk by falling into any trouble by following the compliances, right? So now my question is, what are the risks of non-compliance? Like, I'm sure there are definitely some penalties for that. So if there are any, can you please explain that to us?
Yeah, a lot of risk, I would call it. First one is your reputation itself gets impacted. The moment this comes in this is the day of social media, and everybody is now a journalist. Everybody can tweet and put it on LinkedIn or share on social media what's happening in an organization. So the moment if it's an organization which is non-compliant and that goes out, it's a big loss of reputation for the organization. And which will also mean that you will lose customers, because customers will stop trusting you, because they'll say this organization is not trustworthy at all. no, the brand value of the company goes down. There is a loss of faith in companies, shareholders, and investors, because as a company, you start questioning the leadership. If you are a employee and if you are a consumer, then you start thinking, hey, are the products really, if the person is non-compliant, let's say on HR standpoint or finance standpoint, what kind of compliances they would have had when it comes to product? Are the products really safe? You immediately start associating, this at a larger canvas, on that. So that happens. So you lose customers on account of that. So it's not just about statutory penal action or the risk which is there, but it's also about the reputation, the brand, the faith in the company, the customer loyalty, all of that. Then there is also, you can get into a situation where there can be lawsuits against you. You'll be more or less fighting legal battles, whether those lawsuits can be done by the stakeholders impacted negatively, or it can be by the government because you have not complied with certain laws. So then so much energy of the management gets wasted. I would call it in fighting the lawsuits, which would have been used to put to use a better use if the company would have been compliant. Then there are risks around withdrawal of certain benefits. Sometimes you are in a certain zone where there are certain benefits which are given to you. For example, a few years back, I was in a state where there was a requirement that 70% of the employment needs to happen for the residents or citizens of that particular state. And there's certain because of for that they had given certain fiscal benefits around it. There was exemption around income tax, there were exemptions around excise, all of that were there because the endeavor of the state government was around generating more employment in the state. But if you're not doing that, and I've seen the organization governments withdrawing those benefits if you have not, if the company has not met with those compliance requirements which have come in by that. So it's a big loss, financial loss to the company. It's also about sometimes they suspend if the compliance is major one. Sometimes they also stop the operation. They stop the factory from running. They stop the operation from running, and that has its own serious consequences. Then there can be, as said earlier, there can be penal action against the directors or the occupier or the factory managers under various acts. And the senior leadership is up there fighting those, your organizations fighting for them, paying the fines, and there can be, sometimes a complete shutdown of the organization. We've seen certain situations where the government just closes, asks the company to shut down because they are not complied with the law. So it has various repercussions, not just about some fine or some notice, but it can lead to serious financial and operational consequences also in the organization.
Absolutely, sir. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on this. Well, here is my last question. So to conclude, sir, what is the importance of compliance management system according to you? And how does it help in measuring the different compliances?
The compliance management system, it's really, as said, I was telling earlier that it really helps you to know the status on a real-time basis. That's the biggest thing, because otherwise the compliances are very scattered, and it's different areas. So even if you have financial compliance, you have compliances around HR policies, you have compliance around contractual, laws, you have compliance around, regulatory authorities, all of that. It's a pretty broad basket. And within, if you narrow it down to, let's say, HR, again, when it comes to the compliance around wages, it rests with the payroll. If you look at the compliance around industrial relations, it rests primarily with the factory HR managers. If you look at compliance around welfare or health and safety, it again rests with the health and safety manager or the HR manager in the site. So on and so forth. So it's a very scattered landscape depending upon what kind of compliance are there. In organizations, you have different kinds of people. So once you have a compliance management system, everybody is religiously updating the details up there, then at one click of a button, you can very easily come to know of it, where you are going right, where you are not going right, which area needs to be strengthened. where the compliance is not happening and why, then you can question why it's not happening, and you can take remedial measures immediately. So you don't need to wait for an audit of a regulatory authority to come and surface that non-compliance to you. The leadership can very quickly at a real-time basis know where the issue is, and they can immediately act on that. That's one. Second is it also ensures that there is transparency in the organization around where we are and what's the status. It builds trust, builds a culture of openness around it, and everybody is aware of where we are and what we are doing. It also makes a process more foolproof because it becomes a more process driven rather than a person driven. You're not relying on one person, but you're relying on a tool, which people have access to. So the ensuring that the compliance to the compliances becomes much more easier. When you're doing that, you are not really wasting a lot of man hours or in terms of collating the reports when you need it. You quickly can get it with the flick of the button. So overall, it's like giving a good governance, which happens around it. And if you really sometimes the compliance management tools, if they're on cloud, then the agency with which you're working will keep on updating the laws at the back end, and your system remains updated always, and so that you never get into a situation where your tool is out of sync with the current the law. So from that standpoint, also it helps you stay updated. So overall, I think it has a lot of benefits if we use the compliance management tool in terms of ensuring that we are open, transparent, and acting on time, and there is visibility to the people around where we are on this.
Definitely, sir. So I think with this, we have reached end of the first part of our session, and I can already see the audience questions are here in line. But before that, thank you, Mr. Amit, for such an insightful and knowledgeable session. I'm sure that our audience have gathered a lot of information from this, and they have collected a lot of details on this buzzing topic through our discussion. Thank you so much again. So now I'd like to take up the questions from the audience. So the very first question we have is one of our attendee would like to know that they are submitting monthly compliance under Minimum Wages Act and want to know if the employee monthly gross salary is more than 21,100 rupees, including all the allowance. So is he eligible for bonus? Is there any salary limit for employees that they're not eligible for bonus?
There is there is a limit which the law provides for. So it's not that everybody in an organization gets covered under the Payment of Bonus Act. So there are two kinds of bonuses which are there. One is the statutory bonus, which is governed under the Payment of Bonus Act, and then there is maybe the performance-linked incentive or productivity incentive or efficiency incentive or profit sharing incentive, which are typically there in organization. So when it comes to the Payment of Bonus Act, which is the statutory bonus, there you have this upper limit around the eligible employees, and people who are beyond that, they are the ones who are not covered into it. But generally, they look at the basic salary and not just the monthly gross wages. So you have to look at is the basic salary within that piece or not? Because sometimes I'll tell you, organizations tend to kind of, when it comes to a contribution, they'll say, okay, it's on basic. When it comes to a liability, then they say, okay, we are looking at gross. So generally they look at the basic wages here. So even if the gross salary is 21,100, but if the basic wage is, let's say, 15,000 or 16,000, in my view, the person would get covered under this, and it needs to be, will be under the eligibility.
Sure. So I hope that answers the question. Next one, we have an interesting question, sir. So this is from one of our attendees who would like to know. They say that with the latest trend, the drivers and delivery boys are taken as owner cum driver. So the driver use their own vehicle and provide his services, and based on the trip, he is paid commission on monthly basis. So does this fall under employer and employee relationship, and whether he is considered as employee, and whether the employer is liable to comply with the statutory contributions such as PF, ESI, etc.?
It's a gray area, Mr. Basavaraj. I think he has said that it's a very gray area because our labor laws today are still not covering the gig economy, which is this kind of workforce is into, and they would be not just, and those delivery boys or girls or these drivers would not just be associated with one company. So they have generally have seen apps of multiple organizations. Drivers have seen having an Ola app as well as an Uber app, and they would both they depending upon what they would want to pick it up. The current position, it's, so I said, it's how you interpret it. Currently, these people are called. If you look at any terminology, they will use called driver partners. So they call them. They don't call them as employees or anything. They call them as driver partners. Their contract is like that, and and organizations then tend to deny the employer-employee relationship. But there are cases which I have come to know in certain other countries where the courts have delivered judgments that saying that they would be coming under the employer-employee relationship. But this is still a gray area, I would call it at this point of time. But the new codes which are coming in now, which are yet to be implemented, they have this provision of gig employees and how do you really take care of their social security. But as of now, it's one can take a position on either side on this, and it's still a zone which needs to be clarified either through the law or through any kind of a judicial pronouncement.
Sure. I hope that answers the question. So next question is about the penalty. I think we have almost like partially we have discussed about this, but I'll just take it up. So the question is, what is the penalty for not adhering to the Payment of Bonus Act? Can you please elaborate more on Bonus Act eligibility?
So I said the Bonus Act very clearly specifies that beyond, people who are below a particular threshold of wages, they are will be eligible for bonus. So generally, I said now that they look at the authorities look at the basic wages in my experience, and then there is a formula of calculation of bonus, which depends upon the profitability. So it ranges from 8.33% to 20%, and then depending upon how much profits organization has made and how much is the allocable surplus, and based on the allocable surplus we come up with a percentage, and the percentage minimum has to be 8.33, maximum has to be 20, and then there is so just because somebody's wages are 21,000 rupees, let's say, it's not that you have to pay bonus on 21,000. Then it's about what is the in certain states you have the rule that you have to pay it on the minimum wages. So whatever the minimum wage which has been scheduled, for that kind of employment. So, for example, if there is certain rule where the minimum wage is 15,000, then you have to calculate the bonus on 15,000 rupees as the wages, and then make the necessary payment to the employee on that. So that's what the eligibility. So the 7,000 rupee limit generally we people talk about is not just 7,000. Depending on state to state, we do see variations where it's minimum wages also come into the play, and then the calculation is done on that.
Sure. So I hope that answers the question. So the next one is one of our attendees saying, my company is a startup and we want to provide unlimited leaves for our corporate employees. So with that, do the employees need to apply for leaves, and will leave encashment be inevitable when employee leaves the organization?
So leave encashment happens when you have a pool of leaves, because under the Factories Act it mentions that there are certain number of leaves you get credited every year, and you can carry forward to a certain extent, and then beyond that there's no obligation for the employer to to accumulate. And then when the person leaves, that leave encashment needs to happen. There are organizations where there is no where there's mandate that at the end of the year the entire leave has to be liquidated, or you have to avail the leave, that there's nothing gets carried forward, especially on the not on the factory side, but on the shops and establishment side, you see that. So if you don't have any accumulation, then there is no concept of encashment. Encashment will happen only when there is accumulation. In your case, in my understanding, there is no accumulation happening here because you are providing leave as and when the person needs that, and you have not kept any cap on number of leaves which you are giving. So in my view, there will not be any encashment in this case because there is no accumulation happening to the employee as such.
All right. So I think the next question is around PF. So is PF compulsory to every employee or it depends on the company law? Can employee choose OPTS option before joining the organization?
So if your organization is you mean so there are two tests to it. One is whether whether your organization gets covered under the PF Act or not. That depends on the number of people you have. And second is about the wages. So there is upper limit, which is there of I think 16,000 currently, which is below which you have to compulsorily cover the employees under the provident fund. If somebody is beyond that, that's where the option lies. But it's a good practice to have PF. It's a long-term social security. I would never recommend an organization not to give PF because in India, we don't have a strong social security base. In that case, PF acts as a very good saving for the retirement years. It earns interest, which is tax-free. Uh, and it has a lot of statutory backing, in terms of, you can't attach it and all. So it's good to, it's a good practice, even if, let's say you are an organization which is below the threshold limit for the PF Act eligibility and the people are below, above the upper limit of the eligibility, I would say it's still a good option to cover them under PF.
All right. So the next question is about the Employee Compensation Act. So Compensation Act is applicable only to the certain sectors given in the schedule of the Act. Is this correct?
Yeah, this act is applicable, where in those scheduled employments. That's one, and second is it's also, where there's ESI applicable. Then the Employee Compensation Act generally is not implemented because then the ESI takes care of this particular aspect in terms of the compensation in case of any kind of a disablement or death.
Also, sir, I think there's a follow-up question on this. So if an employee is covered under a corporate insurance policy, such as group accident insurance policy, does the employer still need to comply with the Employees Compensation Act?
Yes, if then group accident policies is one which is there, but which the organization can, which this is an additional piece. But if the Employee Compensation Act is applicable on the particular employment in a particular area, that compensation needs to be given to the employee in line with the calculation in the Act. Now, companies can take a policy around that, which means that in case such a situation happens, the insurance company will pay the compensation. So that you can de-risk an organization through that, but it can't be that I will not pay the calculation under the Employee Compensation Act because we have taken a group personal accident insurance policy. That doesn't happen till the time. So group personal accident insurance is not a mandatory thing. It's not a statutory thing. That's your own policy. You give it, you don't give it. It's up to you. Complying with the act where applicable is mandatory. So you can de-risk yourself by taking a policy on that. So that whenever such a situation happens, insurance company is paying and you're paying a marginal premium, just like we take the other non-life insurances. But we need to comply with the calculation of the act and ensure that the payment is made.
All right. So our next question, sir, I think this is around social security benefits. So does the social security benefits like PF, ESI, gratuity, bonus, LWF, etc., is applicable for trainees or interns? Do we need to comply under respective statutory authority for these trainees or interns?
So here I would say, please go back to the definition of employee mentioned under these act. If your employee definition covers this, then it will be applicable. So we'll have to always look at it from an act standpoint, what is that definition? Is the person working, in line with or is the person coming under that definition or not? Interns generally don't come under, because interns are generally part of they're not employees. They are coming under, they're working, they're studying somewhere and they come and do some project for a few months and then they go back. Trainees sometimes work as full-time employees. If they're working as full-time employees, then it's better to give them the PF and ESI, because otherwise it's not a fair practice. So we need to differentiate from that standpoint. Wherever it's about somebody comes under the definition of employee there or a worker there, Whitfield there. So trainees, if it's a trainee working full-time with the organization, in my view, we should be paying the PFESI for that, because the social security is important. But if it's trainee is like some kind of a college trainee, or intern is a college intern, then it changes, because then there is no employer-employee relationship during that period.
Sure. Also, dear attendees, due to interest of time, we may not be able to take up each and every question of yours, but if any of your questions are unanswered, please don't be disappointed. You can always write to us and we will definitely get back to you with the responses. At the same time, sir, I'll just take few more questions before we wrap up the session, if you're okay with that.
Yes.
Just 2 or 3 more questions.
Okay, we can probably take 2 more. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you so much. Yeah. So I think one of our attendee would like to know, does IT companies come under Industrial Dispute Act?
So the companies doesn't come under the ID Act or not. So it's the employees who either come under the Act or not. That's how I would look at it, because IT company per se would definitely come under the ID Act. But because that if you look at the definition of industry there, all of the criteria which is mentioned will get fulfilled when it comes to an IT company. The problem or the issue which is happening currently in the labor market is about the employees, because there are certain employees who are saying that yes, we are coming as workmen under the Industrial Disputes Act, because they are doing manual, technical, those kind of works, which are covered in the definition of workmen there. And in certain cases, labor departments have also recognized that. We also have seen certain areas there is a union of those people. So primarily it's about what kind of work an employee does, which determines whether the person will be workman or not. Earlier, we used to classify blue collared, white collared. White collared is not covered under the workman. Blue collared is covered under the workman. That's one definition which was more there in the factory, because in factory that manual work or the technical work or data entry work was done by the blue collared workforce. But in an IT company, when it's a white collared workforce is doing that, from that standpoint, if the person doesn't have managerial responsibility, it generally the labor authorities have taken a view that they would be covered under the Workmen and then the ID Act. I don't know how many of you know that, but a pilot is covered under the as a workman under the ID Act. You can say that the person is, well paid. He's a white collared employee, all of that. But technically, he or she is driving a machine. Aircraft is a machine, and this person is operating that machine. It may require a very high level of skill to do that. He may be a highly skilled machine operator. Person is so the courts have taken a view, in my experience, where they have said that it's about the kind of work which the person is doing, and not about the classification or the salary on that. So to to give you a short answer, the labor departments are taking a view which I have seen, where depending on the kind of work, those people are getting recognized as the workmen. But again, it depends on what work a person is doing. It's not that everybody in an IT company will be under the will be classified under workmen. It all depends on what kind of work a person is doing.
Sure. I think one last question for today, and I think so this is somewhat in similar lines to what we discussed. So the question is, are IT organizations required to be compliant with the Factories Act, or is it okay to be compliant with just shop and establishment of state only?
So generally, they are covered under the Shops and Establishments Act, most of the office locations, and not in the factory, because you need to be classified as a factory to be covered under the Factories Act. You need to do a manufacturing process, and which manufacturing process is very clearly defined under the Act in the definition. So if you are in that manufacturing process, or if there is some part of what is happening there, then it can cover. Otherwise, generally, no, it's the Shop and Establishment Act which covers the IT companies, because that's not we don't see manufacturing activity happening. But yes, if there's a kitchen attached to it, where the food is getting prepared, that area, there has been instances where the view has been taken that that area is a factory, because there is a manufacturing activity happening in the kitchen. So you need to look at the test is, it's not, there's nothing overarching in this. It's all about the kind of work you have to. Every test will be about whether the definition of work comes under the definition of manufacturing or not. If there is some part of it which is coming under it, then yes, that only that element will get covered as a factory, but otherwise rest of it will be the shops and establishment. That's why you generally see many IT companies, they have the kitchen outside, and they serve the food, because otherwise that area they will have to designate as a factory, that if they're doing any kind of manufacturing activity, and cooking is a manufacturing activity from that standpoint.
Right. Thank you so much. I think this helps a lot. So I think with this, we are now reaching towards the end of this session. And again, dear participants, please don't be disappointed if any of your questions are unanswered. You can definitely reach out to us through our community, that is Great Tribe. So basically, Great Tribe is a knowledge sharing platform. It's a Q&A forum where you can post your questions, and you can seek answers from many HRs just like you from the industry. And also we have the expert panel like Mr. Amit Sharma and all of them on the Great Tribe community who will also be answering your questions. So the URL for this community is already here on the screen, as you can see. Please do feel free to try it out. And I think with this, it's now time to conclude this session. But before that, I would like to once again thank Mr. Amit for this session. You have certainly given us a lot of insight on HR compliance, sir. And also thanks to all the attendees as well who has joined the session today and for making it more successful. If you have any more questions, you can always write back to us on the given mail ID on the screen that you can see now. That is rakigautam@greatip.com, and we will definitely get back to you with the responses. So I think with this now, we are going to end the session. We will soon see you in the next upcoming session with another interesting topic of discussion. Till then, have a great time. Stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you.